What is going on, Secondhand Talent family? It is Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent. Thank you again, Luke Chu, for sponsoring the Lo-Fi, the toy of the season. That's over there, sorry, and Tenacious Toys for the desk candy over there. But let's get right to it. We have with us a very special guest today. We have Neil Twa. Neil is the author of Almost Automated Income with FBA and the host of the High Voltage Business Builders podcast. Neil, welcome to Secondhand Talent.
Thanks for having me on, Steiner. I appreciate it, bro.
Well, it's really a pleasure having you on, and you know, we got connected in a bit of a circuitous way, and I'm sure folks are wondering, based on, you know, the history of the show, the regular listeners, viewers, and readers, you know, what the hell does this have to do with everything? And I think everything has everything to do with music, you know, kind of
in whatever way we want to put it together. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And, you know, you and I had a great conversation before you coming on the show, and I really appreciated it because it gave me a new insight as to how folks who might be operating just outside of the barrier of the music industry acknowledge it, choose to operate with it or without it. And I think it's really important to have that perspective and that voice on the show. But first, you know, as I alluded to, you know, you and I were connected in kind of a secondhand way, so as it were. And I'm curious, when you were approached with being on a podcast called Secondhand Talent, I'm curious to know, when you first heard the name, what your impression was.
Secondhand Talent. Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it really just has to do, you know, everybody thinks second is a bad position to be in, and I don't always agree with that, actually. I mean, it depends upon where you're going and what you want to do and what you're after. And, you know, if you're not the primary, sometimes that's okay, because sometimes the people, you know, the first ones up the hill, they take the biggest blows, and sometimes being number two isn't so bad. We like to joke about that in our world of e-commerce, that, you know, if there's a primary brand and we can come in behind that brand and do really great and make good sales, if we can become the Pepsi to somebody's Coke, you know, that's not such a bad deal. You can make a good living, you can have fun, and you don't have to take all the arrows, right? And I think, you know, when I heard the name, I thought, yeah, that resonates with some of the stuff that I normally talk about. Yeah, so there we go. So I was like, let's give it a shot and see what happens. And we talked, you know, and I have a music background. And so we have that connection. Of course, music is a universal language, and different types of music and stuff. And so that was just part of the reason I said yes to the podcast. And I'm glad you did too, because you never know who's going to be listening. There may be one person out there today that listens to this and says, yeah, man, that resonates with me. And that'd be awesome.
You know, let's just jump right into it. You know, one of the biggest issues facing the live music industry, you know, you talk a lot about e-commerce, and I've tuned into some episodes of your podcast and have learned a lot of things about business that I didn't know. But one thing that I do know is that at its core, in addition to being art, live music is an industry. We call it the music industry for a reason. You know, it's a business, and the goal is to scale and to grow. And a big issue I think that would be great to tackle first is we're seeing a big lapse in the drive to buy concert tickets right now. There's a big degradation, you know, and we'll talk all about it, I guess, but I'd love to hear your perspective on maybe some of the reasoning behind some of the purchasing power disappearing behind concert expenditure, maybe what bands could do better to increase their chances to obtain that more limited purchasing power, and some of the things that go into cost effectiveness for running a machine like a band.
I mean, personally, what I say, you know, in business is a universal language of products and services, one way or another, whether you're making music or making physical products. If you're making something for someone else, you know, you're in the services industry or the product industry. And, you know, bands have the opportunity to provide both a service, a music, an environment, experience, as well as a product through merchandise or other types of things. And I think what they miss out sometimes on is the opportunity to let merchandising become a greater component of their business, because they're afraid to kind of, you know, people follow us for the band, or they follow us for the music, or they do these kinds of things, but they don't really, you know, they're not terribly interested in us pitching them all their products. So the trick here is to kind of look at the way you talk about your products, deal with your products, build interest in them, and do it in such a way where people are, wanting to buy the products you're not selling them to them. And it's influence at the end of the day. And I think there's an opportunity to influence people's purchasing of your products and even your services. And online is a huge way to do that. And definitely if you're not, really pushing hard in the social media realm today, you're missing out. If you're not using AI tool sets to take snippets of your audio, your clips, your music, and push those out and continue to push those out. When something works, go make 5 more versions of that one and push it out. There's just not enough effort to take and optimize online space. We were forced to do that, all of us, through the different business methods during the pandemic. And I think that was an opportunity where some ingenuity and entrepreneurialism kicked in, and some bands and some opportunities and venues and stuff took advantage of that, and others did not. And so we've got a shakedown across multiple industries. Music not just being one, tickets being one, venues. I mean, for 2-3 years, or ticket sales have been terrible, and most people didn't want to get involved. Online sales have slowed to some degree in some areas, but they've increased dramatically in others due to those changes. And I just, really in business, it's always about pivoting to an offer that to some group of people feels irresistible, and they feel dumb saying no to it. That's Alex Ramosi. Coined that phrase. And really, at the end of the day, if you've got a product, a service, something unique, that's your opportunity. I think the last component of that is that folks just want to, they want to enjoy an experience. And if you are not attracting the right crowds at the right price points, then you're just not raising the level of affinity of your brand at the end of the day. And your brand could be you, it could be your band, could be your product, could be the service. And just leveling that up across any kind of business is an opportunity to pivot or change. And I think, having, again, a music background, you want to sort of stay true to what you're trying to create, what you're trying to be, what you're trying to get others to appreciate about what you're doing. And that is always hard sometimes to change that affect. And for me personally, that's why I ended up just, really loving jazz. I know I don't look like I'm one of the jazz guys, but man, I absolutely love jazz. I grew up on it. I enjoyed playing it. Played the trumpet for a long time, and I just, not playing on the page and not playing to a specific script and then just letting it go was part of the fun.
Absolutely. And, there were a lot of great points in what you said there, but I'd like to hone in on one thing specifically, because I think it really reaches across everything you had to say. Focusing on merch. Because with merchandise, you have 2 opportunities. One, obviously, is to, easy turnover. And the second is to build community. Because when you have folks trading around your band's pins, your band's stickers, lighters, koozies, etc., and those are getting into other folks' hands, that word of mouth within friend groups is priceless, right?
Yeah, that's the in-demand creation.
Well, that's the in-demand creation. But then on top of that, it fosters community.
Yeah.
And, I remember when I was working in merch production, the golden 3, stickers, koozies, and lighters. Every touring band should have stickers, koozies, and lighters, because those are purchases that the average consumer doesn't even register. When you're asking $65 for a poster, you better have a $5 sticker to counter that, to attract the buyer to purchase something at least, as opposed to leaving them with just the one high dollar option. And I think it's a real big missed opportunity by a lot of bands. And shout out Garrett from Spafford, that their merch guy, extraordinarily innovative. And I got to spend a night watching him work and, really going on the fly. And as you were saying, kind of like with jazz, off the page and running with his own ideas and being extraordinarily successful with it. So special kudos to him. But I really think that message that, diversifying your merch, making it attainable in addition to the show, and then pushing it in the community.
Yeah. One of the ways I know that would work well, and I've seen it for a number of bands, is of course to get to the idea of the shareable or collectible, is to get to some scarcity. So building in some fake scarcity and limitations around it, limited runs, limited editions. There's 100 of these particular things, as opposed to saying there's an unlimited supply. Here's your coupon. Sort of creates that idea of limited scarcity, because if you only run with 100 or so at a time, you can then keep doing that over and over and over again.
It does, and being perfectly transparent, that's exactly what we did with our secondhand talent merchandise. We made it limited edition. I mean, both
Yep.
for affordability reasons and for scarcity purposes. But the one
Yeah.
note I would add to that is scarcity is relative to the artist that produces it.
That's right. It has to go along with the brand.
It has to, like, the art, and again, not the art itself necessarily, but the artist, the integrity of the artist has, like Jim Pollock, for example, or David Welker, two Fish poster artists who have been with them, making work for them since the 90s, that are like, these are well-established artists in their own right and have their own careers outside of Fish to make them respected enough within the community.
Yeah.
But again, it's diversifying what you offer and understanding. And Mark Serlo talked about this in his interview. He took up carpentry because the biggest piece of advice he got from one of his heroes, Lindsey Buckingham, while doing a poster show, was get a day job. Because this is, something that you do because you love to do it. And, as you were saying, you started with a live music background, and I'm curious, what kind of segued you out of that and into more of the, white collar world, so to speak?
Well, necessity, right? So I'm going to date myself. I'm not terribly old, I don't think, but at 49, I've seen a lot of life and a lot of things have changed extremely fast. Since the internet came online, right? Which made, a lot of old people younger for many reasons, or changed things so dramatically that it feels like it's been a long, long time and we've been in this for a while. And really it's still so new that some of us can still remember the days before the internet and we don't have gray hair. Right? So yeah, right? Like it's like that strange conundrum where
I resemble that remark.
We're not like really old, but at the same time, we're like old compared to the guys who've had their phones the whole time, right? Back in the day before internet. When we used to mail letters and hobble around, right?
There was 32 of us in a shoebox in the middle of the road.
Yeah, right. Well, what I discovered was, in funny terms, at that point in life, I didn't want to live in a van down by the river. So today, that's like totally cool, and people like all the money on social media living in a van down by the river, right? That back then, that was still seen like not the success it could look like.
I'm gonna refrain from doing my Farley impression, but yes,
right. I already caught it. We got it. So the end result was, I'm like, okay, the internet's coming online. There's got to be something more here. I've got to figure out how to change this, position it, do something, and I wasn't good at programming, and I didn't want to learn how to do that at the end of the day. And really, I ended up sort of teaching myself that as a bridge to kind of getting out and changing, for jumping out of college, jumping out of the whole thing and just leaving it all behind. And, going and getting a job in the corporate world, because that's where the money was being spent. So I just I followed the money in order to make the money, because that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to learn about the online and the tools and resources and the business, and just couldn't do that where I was.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we talk about,
a great time to do it.
Well, listen, first of all, exactly. Nail on the head. I mean, right place, right time. What are you going to do?
Opportunity, right place, right time.
Mm-hmm. When opportunity strikes, you better.
Well, and quite frankly, we're seeing some of that again. I was speaking about this morning, and relative to the change that I saw then versus the way AI is now adapting. The change of music online, as well as products online, social media, it's really revamping a structure of our culture from the top down. I mean, all the way down to the guy who may be replaced at the warehouse, to the people who are shifting opportunities to create AI tools and other things, and they're sort of seeing as opportunities and making business out of now. You got 20, 30 somethings out here that are pumping out these tools and learning that step and realizing, well, why am I going to get a degree in, being in a legal or something, or why am I going after this particular, a trade, when all of a sudden, I'm going to be replaced? Like, why am I like, they're making some of those life choices right now to go, oh my gosh, why am I in college when I should be out there learning or doing? And maybe they're trying and realizing, I'm not being taught any of this currently in my 4-year degree for $200,000 a year. Why am I still here? Like, this is going to be gone in years, 6 months, 12 months. It's changing so fast.
And 2020 vision, I'm a little bit after you, but 2020 vision, or hindsight, I would have loved to have computer literacy and internet literacy taught to me in the late 2009s and the early 2010s, because to be able to have mastered it even at that point would have given me such an advantage right now. But the fact of the matter is, it did absolutely change so quickly and so rapidly that if you didn't kind of adapt with it and meet that curve where it was at, then you were kind of left behind. And I think, two examples in the live music industry, kind of getting back to the COVID era of it, you had Trey Anastasio on the one hand with the Beacon Jams, where he was just, streaming live solo shows of himself with Mark Janowitz, former guest of the show, lighting him up. And then not I don't care what people say in the comments, I'm not a biggest fan of their music, but Goose absolutely took the situation of COVID to full advantage. And I mean, that's in my mind, they took advantage of that time and it propelled them forward. And there were other bands that fell off the map at that same time. And it was a much larger ratio falling off than catching on. Like that adaptability curve is, at a certain point, it gets very steep.
It does, and it really ends up being the opportunity cost of one thing over another. My opportunity cost was, well, I'm not going to have an education, quote unquote, by the world's standards, which was still considered in more ways than it is now, in higher esteem for jobs and credibility and goals and other things if you want to keep moving that route. I only did it as basically a tool to knowing that I never wanted to get into corporations in the first place, and it was a crime of opportunity I used to help gain momentum, learning, knowledge, education, etc. Always knowing that I was eventually going to be in an entrepreneurial business role. I just wasn't sure exactly when or how. I just knew that was what I wanted to do, no matter what. I just used the tools that were in front of me right now to get the momentum necessary to get there. And in 2007, I did. I jumped out and started my own business.
I got to ask, did that sort of rebellious, I want to jump out on my own attitude, does that have any hearkening back to that live music experience, and just kind of, did that feed into it? It's the free flow
creativity, the natural spirit of like just creation. And when I got to business and realized with the internet, at that point, the creativity component of it was just on the cusp, just barely being thought about. Ideas were barely being generated. The first failures just started happening in 99 and 2000 that got to change and pivot the way everybody dealt with this. And then 25 years later, we see what it is today. And many people are like, crap, I would have done that then. Or, I wish I would have jumped on this there. And like, you have those opportunities still, and there are openings all over the place now. Due to speed of technology, we were dealing with an internet that still had a limited amount of people on it, that didn't have the bandwidth or virility or systems of AI and controls it has now. And in 2025, you can get one person in their basement recording over and over and over again and just playing in TikTok until something pops off, and bam, all of a sudden they've got some notoriety, they got some influence status. They're, people are starting to hear who they are, and they're getting millions of views and millions of downloads, and they're going independent, right? Which is cool. That wasn't really an opportunity back then. There wasn't an opportunity to do anything beyond that. And I thought for a while, as I was going through that, could I make a professional career out of this? And it seemed a lot less difficult to do it then than it is now. But in actuality, that was part of the myth I sort of bought into. And it's like, well, now it would be so much easier to do it now.
It's not the truth. And that myth is currently being propagated. And
yep.
No
one will ever have any opportunity, right?
Well, up until this past school year, I've been a teacher for most of my career, and I swear over the last 5 years since COVID, since we came back to school after COVID, there are famous studies famous videos where folks, go into really any school and any major city and ask, what do you want to be? And the amount of students that say professional athlete is, through the roof. And I think
it's through the roof. Yeah. Or they say, I want to be a YouTube influencer.
Over the last few years, my argument has been, you can just swap out the word athlete with influencer and have damn near that same ratio, if not more.
Yeah,
And
it's going to be literally at the end of the day, those who are more tenacious and want it more and keep going when others quit, they will eventually find their opportunity. They'll keep shooting basketballs, like Jordan said, until they get a higher ratio of wins, but will have just maybe greater losses. My room is filled with failures. It's a
that
huge pile of failures for literally what I would consider the smaller amount of success that I've had, which has been very good. But compared to the amount of times I've taken shots and missed things and failed and bombed out, it filled this room with failures. The difference is I just see everyone as an opportunity. I'm not afraid of change. I learned to be adaptable. And I think that's what, a lot of people are not willing to try and do. They maybe have this vision of what they see it actually becoming. And instead of just letting it go, and, I'm not going to say going with the flow to some degree, although that's kind of what I did. They will find a path through. They'll find a moment of opportunity, and they'll be in the right place at the right time. But they have to keep pushing until they meet that moment when that appears. We have literally followed that into my process of business, by which when our world, when we launched the physical products we launch now, and put it into the sphere, we launch 5 products. Right? We don't just take one shot at it. Right? We're going to take multiple shots at defining how that audience wants to see that product from us at that price point at that time, and meeting the right people who want that at the right time. And when that product appears, 1 or 2 of those will literally show up, and we follow the data. There it goes. That's the direction we're going. And if you're out pushing today and you're willing to out hustle, and you got a good sound and you got opportunity, and you don't have to be the greatest player on anything in the world. I mean, Johnny Cash wasn't the greatest musician in the world, but he had the greatest story. Right? He had the greatest song stories. That's what really made people resonate with him.
100%. And I used to tell this to my students who said they wanted to be athletes all the time. Especially, I recall I had one student who was extraordinarily good at baseball.
Yeah.
And I told him, okay, so I've been doing stand-up comedy for 18, 19 years now. And if we converted my good shows to bad shows into an MLB batting average, I would be barred 500 feet from Cooperstown. But despite the low points and despite the failures, the successes have changed my life for the better and have made me the man I am today.
Yeah, because you've pushed hard enough to make those wins actually occur.
And anybody who goes up and expects success, expects that immediate gratification, that's not how it happens. That's
and
not
you're gonna fail through it, right? I mean, it's gonna be an opportunity.
The only way, and that's the other thing I was gonna say, the only way out is through.
Yeah, you have to fail through to get the actionable items, the experience of executing things until you figure out where you fit and how you fit and what you're doing. And then the wisdom comes after that to know what to do right and what to do wrong through the experience you learn. You just don't jump straight into all of that. And you certainly don't just jump straight into the money, that's for sure. You've got to be willing to risk your way through all of that to see some of that reward, no doubt. And really, that's just mindset. That mindset could be applied to any business, music or merchandise or real estate or selling cars. I don't care. What it gets down to is just there's people who want to be tenacious and there's people who want it to come to them without the work. And, that is in the end, I'm just not somebody who's willing to sit around and wait for others to work for me. I'm somebody who gets out there and does it. If someone comes along behind me and I train them how to do it and they're willing to come up and do it, then that's a good relationship. But I found that in my experience, hiring employees was not a good relationship, right? It just wasn't.
we have a saying in Hebrew, "Imena nili mili." If I am not for me, who will be for me? If I'm not my own best advocate, who will stand up for me? And it's really that, if we don't take that mentality into everything we do, it's not just the mentality I take into Secondhand Talent. It's the mentality I take into the classroom. It's the mentality I take into all the jobs that I do. Yeah. It's that I have to be the best version and representation of myself for this role to make this work, to do it right. Yeah. Because if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for me.
Taking ownership of it is important. Yeah.
But that mentality didn't come overnight. It
comes from work. It comes from failure. It comes from opportunities. In my world, it helped me define what I call my 5 Fs. And no, one of them is not what you think it is. The first one was faith, like walking out on a faith. Yeah. No, it's not that one. We'll put that as the sixth. The first one was really, for me, was faith. It was getting past an idea that I had to do all these things for a certain reason, and that I was alone in everything I was doing. For me, I needed a faith as a bigger picture. I needed to believe that there is something greater and more intelligence. I believe in the God of the Bible. So because of that, faith for me was part of walking out on a business and just leaving my job and saying, okay, I'm out. I'm going to do this no matter what, because I believe my purpose and value was better suited to supporting my family and to supporting them directly at a closer relationship. That last year before I left my job at IBM, I traveled 300 days in that last year. I can't support my family and be local and help my wife and be with my children when I'm gone that much. That just wasn't no longer, that had no value and purpose. The money just didn't match up with that anymore, and I had to quit. And it was a good timing because it was the right way to do it. But in the struggles after that, in the 18 years it's taken me to get to where I am today, I discovered better in those processes of struggle and success who my friends and family are. And those are my next two F's. So you've got family and friends. Family is the purpose behind why you have a faith or why you do anything in my world. And then you define sometimes your friends are closer than your family. So friends might be some of your family if you don't have ties or connectivities to them, or they don't relate in the way that you do, or they don't think the way you do, or maybe they're more negative about the things you're doing and they're not a great support group. And you might find in my world, some family are here and some friends are up there, and vice versa. It just depends. And those are two great things that everybody really needs in their support, in their walk, and be able to be successful in anything they do, quite frankly. The finances are actually the fourth one, because the finances enable the first three. The giving, the support, the friends, the family, the faith. None of that is possible for me to extol in an actionable, walkable way in my faith with my family and my friends than having finances that allow me to do that. It isn't just about what I can accumulate and what I can keep, because I know that you don't see a hearse behind a U-Haul behind a hearse. I mean, you literally don't. So I'm not trying to accolade things in this world to build up a big thing in this world, knowing that I'm going out with less clothes than I came in with. So it's not really the purpose. It's like being around my family. That's the value. The finances allowed me, through the work and effort and through support of friends and family and my faith, to get to a place where I can be around my kids. And I can hang out with them every day, and I can work from home, and we homeschool our girls. And that is nothing. I will never regret having the risks and time before to be able to spend that time with my kids no matter what, because that's what's all that's going to matter in the end. It isn't like pile my stuff in my room when I die. I want to see all my things. I'm going to want my kids there, my family. I'm going to want people that matter, because that's really what this whole thing is about at the end of the day. And, the last part of that is freedom. The final pillar of those F's, it stands as freedom for all things. Freedom of choice, freedom of religion, freedom of acting, freedom of your job, freedom of the country, freedom to choose which thing you don't like or dislike, and political or whatever. At the end of the day, we all have freedom. And freedom has choices, and with choices come consequences. Some freedoms have consequences of choice. Some are more positive than others. Some you do because you have a free right to do it. Doesn't mean it's good for somebody else. It doesn't mean it would fit into their narrative or their worldview, but it's okay with me because it's my freedom, and you have it too, which also means we have the opportunity. And if we can take that and strengthen that in our resolve, then we make the choices to do the things we do. We are all free to get up. I know you're married. You're free to walk out of your marriage, right? You're free to do anything you want to do. That freedom is something that if we think first and act second, we will come to realize that we don't have to do anything. We get to do it. So when we change the language of I don't have to do this, I get to do this, you switch the empowerment mode. You know what I'm saying? You switch your empowerment. You get out of the victim or scarcity or this is happening to me, and instead you turn it into I get to do this, so I accept the consequences, positive or negative, of doing that. Don't have to do anything. You don't have to stay married. You don't have to stay on this podcast. You can get up and walk out right now. You don't have to treat me nice. You could treat me badly. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Well, you don't. All of it has consequences, but you don't.
I will say this. One way, and the reason I continue to do this podcast, it doesn't necessarily fill the financial aspect just yet, but it certainly I have faith in the show. I I involve my family, I involve my friends, and I have the freedom to have on whichever guests I choose and the discussions that I would like
100%.
to have and not like to have. And I gotta say, one of the big reasons I continue to do it, even without that financial aspect and pillar of it, is because the conversations that I have had the opportunity to have with folks who I never dreamed that I would be able to talk to, let alone get to meet in person occasionally when I'm lucky enough, has made me so grateful.
Yeah. You're subverting profits over purpose and value. And if you continue that with a heart of servitude, you will find a way to profit in a way that is obviously ethical and others want to support you from those activities. And the profit is more than just finances. I know everybody hears the word profit and immediately their head kind of goes just a little bit. I know that too, because I grew up in a household that had, dad who worked really great, and he was there, and he was an amazing father to show me how to show up and be a man, and how to, do the right things and how to work hard for what I was doing. He didn't know about finances. He didn't know about money really at the end of the day. My mom kind of ran the finances in the house and stuff. She still does. But at the end of the day, profit in our word, or even money, was a 4-letter word. You just didn't talk about it, because if you did, you were disrespecting dad, right? Enough is enough. Don't ask for more. You get what you get. You don't throw a fit. So when the situation was I wanted more money, I had to go work for it. So I had an aptitude to go work and get the things that I wanted to do that I didn't. And eventually that led me to understand more and more and more about money and about finance and about what it can do. But at the end, I think through the struggles through that time, through just, the highs and the lows, I've come to realize, profit is just a word that means many more things than finances. I'm profiting from this relationship today. I hope that others are as well by listening to the podcast. We're profiting from a relationship that's established. Every thing doesn't have to do with money. It can do with relationship and connectivity, and can do with faith and other things. Profit is in my world, it's the bottom of the equation when it comes to finances. There are many ways to profit that lead to opportunities that just don't always end in finances.
And I think that's a really prudent distinction, because I would like to think that when this does hopefully pay the bills and all that I will still be just as grateful for the folks who choose to spend
Humility
their time with me, because well, look,
in a world of very easily arrogant people, thanks to social media, one of the negatives, right?
Well, the way that I see it, nobody has to take time out of their day to talk to me. Nobody's obligated to be on my show, whether I know them, whether I don't, whether we're connected through third party, whether we meet on the street. Right. No one's obligated to be on my show. And the fact that this is episode 96 and ending the season with 99, I mean, I'm just consistently gobsmacked by the faith that other people have in this show to be willing to volunteer their time to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's also one of the reasons I podcast and have done it since like 2021. I think we're at about 185 shows, if I'm not mistaken, on my podcast. And, that's been one of those things that has allowed a lot of relationships, connectivity. Byproduct of that has been, over the years of doing it, I've generated relationships that have also generated business out of that. It wasn't the primary core. It isn't the primary core. And when you listen to it, it's usually just interviewing people, like this, having a fly on the wall conversation about business. It's really meant to kind of help my brand along, even though my brand isn't really, the part of the business as I feature the people, but it's there and it's in the mind of doing things. But it really is about the relationship of connectivity and sharing knowledge and information that someone will be listening to that day and gain something from, get something off of it, have an aha moment, have something click, have something that benefits their life.
So you do host a podcast now, but you started a business first. Talk a little bit about, having, that faith that we were talking about to step out and, start your own thing, what that's about, and then kind of how you decided to, move into podcasting a little bit later.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, that I wanted to, always sort of do my own thing. I was just, due to the internet and online and the craziness that was occurring during that time, and everybody was literally trying to find their way through it, from corporations to academia to the people around it. The money was really being spent in corporations at that point. So I went there first. Like in the college there, I was helping to set up the first labs with the first computers. So things were going like really slow. But the greater internet and the startups and the, ideas were flowing even faster and faster. And, quite frankly, at that time, the college courses were not there, right? They just weren't there to teach you. You had to kind of learn on your own. And so I knew that by going to the corporate world, that was sort of my bridge. I wasn't sure exactly when I would step out of it. I got a little bit closer to my uncle over that time frame, conversation wise. He turned out to be somebody who was a great sounding board and a mentor for me. He had more business and experience. We talked a lot about opportunities and money and stuff, and that really helped me kind of focus more in the abundance aspect, where I'd come from more of the scarcity in my background. But he ended up, he encouraged me, get out and do your own thing. Even if you got to buy a franchise, like do something on your own, figure it out, get started, don't wait, like keep going. And he encouraged me that for quite a long time. And I was getting really close to figuring out that maybe I was going to get a franchise and do something, and I was going to figure this out. He died in an ultra light craft accident at an airport in 2005.
Sorry to hear
and
that.
So,
sorry for your loss.
Yeah, dude, it was a tough time for everybody, especially my aunt. And, for 2 years, I kind of lamented over listening to his conversations rattling through my head. I was having some tough time in my marriage, and that was sort of ended up coming to an end due to just separation of life. It was very challenging. She decided to, go visit guys in San Francisco, and I wasn't cool with that. So, life is what it is. I wasn't the best husband either.
Everybody's going to make decisions, and
we went this way, right?
So nobody else's business.
All that stuff was happening. And I met this amazing girl, and in that couple of years after the change of getting divorced, and then being single for a few years and marrying this girl, and I'm like, okay, this is the chance. Like, this is my time to risk. I've got to restart. I got the reset button. I got a new opportunity to do all this over again in life, and kind of just blank slate start all over again. And when 2007 came around, after about 2 years of lamenting and dealing with that life and having that sort of all behind me, I asked this girl, my wife now for 18 years, Katie, to marry me, and she said yes. And then we got married in March, and then by June, IBM said, "Hey, your whole division is going away." And I was like, "Thank you, Lord, it's time." And so I took the early retirement and left. I was like, "I'm out." That was it. I was ready. It was time. It was a new slate. We were newly married. We're like, let's do this. This is it, man. This is our time to start over.
So what some might see as a calamity, you really took in stride as a blessing in disguise.
It was absolutely a blessing. It wasn't the easiest. It would never have been. And if I'd stopped and waited for the perfect time, it was never going to come. It really wasn't. That's my story. I know a lot of people understand that, but at the same time, that was just really the story. And it didn't work out so much easier during the first year. I'm trying to figure out how to, do business and get things moving and understand what it means to do all levels of the business. What's accounting? How do I account for it? And all these things, stuff I kind of knew, but I didn't know how to apply to a business of my own. So I had to relearn some of these things and start applying it in a different way. Newly married, figuring that out. That was fun. We were having a great time together being married, and she's like my very good friend, and then became my wife and is still my, my best friend. And then we found out we were pregnant by October with our first baby. So we were new business, new marriage, new baby. Life, was just, poor. So by the time we got to the December or so, she had to be put on bed rest due to complications. And so she was a RN by trade, registered nurse, and had a job and was doing things and thought about going and becoming a nurse practitioner. And so we had that income until December, and that income was gone. So we were really, poorly kicking it around year one after being married with a new baby on the way. And, that to me could have been more of a debilitating, more of a depression, more like, what am I going to do? More fear, more whatever. But I guess it's just personality type. Maybe I was trained into it. Maybe it's just the right time. Maybe I wanted it enough that I was simply willing to listen to the opportunities and not the negativities that people may have said or thought about, or even I might have tried to, get into my own head in that process. And I just took everything as an opportunity. I just preferred to turn around and say that everything that is happening is an opportunity to dig in, dig deeper, push harder. And for the next couple of years, I just got involved in more, consulting for businesses and taking some jobs. And turns out, IBM comes back and says, "Hey, that project, that you left, the one where it got shut down, it kept going, but everybody got fired and we left like 2 people in charge. Yeah, it's totally a crapshoot. Can you come back and fix it?" And I was like, well, I don't want to be an employee again. I'm at home now. We're on to our second child. We're doing the home thing. I'm figuring this out. I got my business going. I was like, but maybe I would, subcontract. Maybe you would let me bill. And they're like, absolutely. Name your rate and your per diem and you'll be on the job. And I was like, $250 an hour plus per diem. And they were like, sold, when you can be here. And I'm like, what? So that kind of launched my consulting career. And then within 4 to 5 years after that first project, I had 10 different consultants working underneath me that were positioned out into different parts of the world doing different business, consulting for me. And to do that in short order, I learned how to do internet marketing more so than I really wanted to do in the past and had an opportunity to do. I was now focused on like building the business. So I was learning how to do internet marketing. And that was back when we didn't have all the really easy things you can do today. Let's be clear. There weren't like web interfaces and push button Facebook ads. There was no TikTok and viral anything.
No,
there was,
hard coding SEO URL and making sure that everything's. I mean, this is the early 2010s, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, 2000, and by the time we got through that, 2010, 2012, and really in 2008 to 9 is when I started the internet marketing stuff, and there was just spreadsheets, and I was uploading stuff into systems to run campaigns and waiting to see how it would come down because there weren't push button marketing interfaces. Everybody complains about trying to get traffic and get people to buy your stuff today, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, you have no idea how much easier it is today to launch a campaign and figure it out.
The way
we were just doing stuff with literal spreadsheets.
The way you used to not just push stuff out, but then harvest data. It was all mechanical. It was all.
It was all a little bit of a Hail Mary. And so it took a lot longer to figure things out. And to try to figure out how to make most of those campaigns work in the marketing world, it took me like 299 campaigns before the first one became profitable. Right? Imagine if I'd given up, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. So really that 300 campaign that took off and started making money, I was like, dang, I think I can figure this out now. I sort of see over the things I did wrong. It was like the light bulbs went off and every campaign after that started to do well. Except it did so well that by the time I got to 2012, I didn't need anybody anymore. So I let go of all the consultants and I was just doing that on my own. And that's when I discovered Amazon. I was like, oh, physical products. I can control the product. I know how to do the marketing. Maybe we can flip some products and figure that out. And I just literally started flipping products for money on Amazon. That's how it started.
I mean, what's incredible about it and common about it, which I love at the same time, is that it's the American story, right? It's
in some ways. Yeah. Really, in other ways, that feels very odd.
Well, there's, everybody goes through periods of adversity and struggle, especially when they're trying to step out on their own, especially when they're taking a leap of faith. And at the same time, they're starting a family. I mean, there's a real confluence of factors here that would have justified you going really in any which direction, depending on, wherever you had gone from there. I think looking back would have been justified given the circumstances. That being said, the way that you've handled it and the mentality and the mindset, I think speaks for itself. And, my dad, a lot of the things you've been saying have been reminding me of things that my dad says to me all the time. And when we were kids growing up, no matter what was going on, he would come in the door and say, Nisim, 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 miracles, miracles, miracles. And it was just the most mundane stuff in the world, but he was able to see the fantastical in the mundane. And it took me so long. Look for the little
things to make you happy. Yeah.
It took me so long in my life to appreciate that. But now that I do, I'm so grateful for it. So Dad, if you're watching, love you. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thanks, Dad. Because at the end of the day, it's those little things that build up. And then every once in a while, a big thing happens and you appreciate it a little bit more. But if you can find the joy in the little things along the way, it'll make the bigger things that come a little easier to swallow, a little easier to look forward to the changes and move forward. I think one of the biggest things that I've been gifted in my life, one of the things God I know has helped me with, is not to look into the past and feel bad about the things that happened or the things I should do, or to regret that I put my best effort forward, that I was forgiven for the things I did wrong, that I wanted to, make amends or confess anything that I've done wrong. And in that way, I've always wanted to try to keep a clean slate. And so I've always looked forward to the things I can do better based on the things I know came from the past. And I think a lot of times when we feel hurt or troubled or confused and we can't find a way forward, we think the way forward is actually backwards. We think if we look backwards into the things that we didn't do or always lament on, we can tend to pile those things on like luggage. And instead of using them like to climb the mountain, we build them up into a giant mountain and then tell everybody to look at our pitiful sorrow mountain. And we look for those things to try to emotionally lift us up, when in actuality, we need to be shedding that off by actionable items that just keep us moving forward. When my wife asks me, most often she's asked, towards the end of the day, almost every day she'll ask me, "How was your day, honey?" And I say, "Just move the ball forward." Right? What'd you do? Well, today I moved the ball forward. Today is sufficient unto itself. So as I got to the end of the day, I did everything I know I could do today to satisfy whatever situation, help, problems I could solve, whatever I could do. And then I leave it all for the day. And tomorrow will be another day, and I'll deal with those things tomorrow. And maybe whatever I started today will finish tomorrow, or something I did today will be impactful tomorrow, or maybe next week or next month or next year. I just know that it will eventually get there if I just keep going. If I want a relationship in some kind of business or structure or, connectivity, I know that at some point, if I stay focused and just keep going, some door, some connection, some 5th degree, 6th degree of person will connect me to that relationship. And the longer I go, the closer I get. And I know it's just a matter of time.
That's exactly the faith that keeps Secondhand Talent going. I mean, I couldn't have put it, better myself.
You have to believe above anybody else that it'll work.
But it's also doing the work yourself. And then again, touching back
actionable work, yes,
onto what you were saying before. Another thing my dad always said to us, 90% of life is just showing up. And, you had mentioned about, that 300th campaign, right? And its success and unlocking it. And had you given up, at $2.99, we may not be talking today. And I'm grateful that you didn't give up at $2.99 and that we are talking
Me
today.
too, man. Because that would have stunk. That was such a win, man. I remember that tiny little win that first day. It went profitable after all that failure and tens of thousands of dollars in credit cards that I owed to have to pay off all the mistakes that I made. It was that breath of air that's like, go, just keep going.
But to be able to take that gulp of fresh air and use it to sustain you to the next win and the next one, that's that. But being able to utilize that oxygen properly is so powerful. And it's really, really been cool to hear, these points of navigation through your story. And because, again, last thing touching on what you just said, I feel like people, if you ask my mom what my favorite genre is, it's revisionist history, because every time I tell a story, it's different. And I feel like a lot of people in life feel like when they've made a mistake, they can just regress back to a point where they were before they made the mistake and do something else without acknowledging that the mistake has already been made.
And that's just accepting responsibility, looking at it and saying, this is either something I could control and I failed at it, so I'm going to take my hits, but I'm going to keep going, or this is something that occurred, but I'm not going to be victimized by it. I'm going to turn it into an opportunity or look at it a different way. I'm going to refocus it and keep going. It is just a tenacious pattern of repetition and condition and proper coping mechanisms to deal with these things and to simply just not give up. I know that things change. They always change. They do not stay indefinite. In 18 years, I know things change. And while I'm still in business for myself, many aspects of that have changed. And as they changed, one of the biggest things I learned to do was adapt to the change and not take it personally. Not take the idea that something is no longer marketing the same way it was or working the same way it was, but to spin that, adapt it, change it, look for the next, change, a little tweak, a little innovation that kind of puts it back on another path, and just realizing that there is no perfect end to any execution. There is just repetition. And that repetition can continue to lead to opportunities if you just keep going. I know I sound like the fish from Dory, but that's literally what it is.
In the words of John Constantine, which that's made me think of, madness is the only constant. And if you can,
and death and taxes, aren't those the other?
Well, right, also that, but if you can reconcile with that, life is just chaos, and we got to do the best with it what we can. Then that's just the winning attitude that folks need to be able to get through those moments of adversity. In my opinion.
Yeah, no, it really is. And again, I think we all have troubles. We all have struggles financially, personally. Today, it's not my family, but it's as close as you can get. My business partner's son is in the hospital right now because he had to have emergency surgery for a very significant pain issue.
Sorry to hear
I
that.
believe is lowered in his colon, and they're in there right now in the surgery. He may be out by now. I'm not sure. But that's just one of those things that, he's an operator in our business. He's been doing it with us for 10 years. He's an important part of what we do. He's my business partner's son, and he's an amazing guy, and I love him like a brother. I just, this is a struggle. This is a change. We have to pivot. He's not operating the company, so we have to adjust. And obviously, we want him to come out stronger and figure out what the pain is, and hope the surgeons figure out what's going on, and that he recovers very quickly, and it all works out well. At that end, that's just solving problems. It's a business. He is a part of the business. We have to solve the problem because he's no longer there. And the more I realize business is nothing but a series of solving problems, the more I realize I have to be the one who keeps working on the problems. And that's just a part of the deal. And if you think that you're not going to struggle through problems and that it's going to be a coast, you're actually missing the opportunity to solve the problems. Somebody else's, who might be willing to pay you for it, or your own, which leads you to an opportunity that someone else might be willing to pay you for it. And these are going to be things that have to be more specialized with AI coming. We create music all the time using Suno. My girls and I have fun. We play with the lyrics. We are architecting it. We've been playing with it, for 2 years now since their first versions. They're only on version like 4.5 now. But the speed at which we can architect sound now, variances of sound, lyrics and stuff, just that one thing is dynamically changing the music industry. That's not even to say that's what's going on with videos in Hollywood and television ads, and AI for video is going to absolutely completely pivot the way Hollywood movies and producing and independents can produce movies at quality that matches Hollywood in literally the next less than 24 months, based on the speed at which I'm seeing things already occur. And we may even be closer than that now. Adaptation in this age is more dramatic than adaptation I dealt with when the internet came online, right? Because those systems of change and control are moving dramatically. The middle workforce is being replaced by AI. Those would be a lot of people who might buy your tickets.
Those are the ones. I would actually argue that it's more important, because the opportunity that we had in the late 80s, 90s, and even up till the early 2000s or through 2000s and early 2010s is that, think about that. We're talking about an almost 30-year time period there where time was on our side as far as meeting that learning curve. With AI, one of the other components of it is that it has exponentially sped up the steepness of that learning curve. So I actually would kind of take your point one step further, that meeting this learning curve that we're faced with right now, as far as using AI for adaptability, in the podcast industry, in the music industry, in whichever industry, you're in, is far, far, far more important to pay attention to, because your time frame, as you mentioned, for that adaptability has been truncated by the veracity and perspicacity of the technology itself.
Oh, and it's just moving at speeds that are hard for anyone to keep up. I mean, I try to keep up on some of it. So what I end up doing is just kind of looking at the outliers that may or may not impact what I'm doing, or just out of fun, or just creativity, out of my own creativity. And then I look at, of course, what we've done in the business, what we're doing in the business, what we spent the last 3 years moving towards, as we'll spend the next couple of years moving towards things like AI videos, AI created images, mock-ups for our boxes and products that can be done faster, ways to speed up the business, research. And so we developed a platform as a service that is our Cayman data dashboard that is now researched AI research tools using Amazon data to tell me exactly which products and customer needs are in demand to put in an AI system like Amazon to produce products at greater speed and profitability and accessibility to the market. And we're using the tools to write the copy for us to ensure that it's in compliance and sounds really good, and the graphics to create the images and videos with video creation. So we're adapting to the market to shift with it, and you need to be looking at that somewhere in your life or creativity, listening to this podcast today, to be able to shift and use and utilize some of those things to compress time and literally take yourself and create a force multiplier. Right, with you being able to take and distribute and create at speeds that are 3 to 5 times faster, along with less people. Looking and adapting and finding your niche in that is going to be the biggest opportunity you have for the next 24 months, because AI is going to change so many things we have, and down to the warehouses up to the executive office.
No, I couldn't agree more. And as I think about all of my rock poster art friends and all my artist friends, I do hope that as more AI imagery gets used, their designing capabilities and their actual artistic sensibilities are kept true, and they maintain and continue their craft, because we do need original art. In addition, AI is a tool. In my opinion, in for a lot of things it may be, but for personal art, hand drawn, there's something that I like to call IA as its opposite, the individual affect. And there is something intrinsically human, that AI, cannot replicate. Call it the soul, call it personality, call it what you will, call any vegetable, as Frank Zappa would say. But
that is 100% true.
Call it by name. But there is
that is
something
100% true. There's still that creativity.
Well, there's no AI substitute for you and I having this conversation, for example. Like,
some people would think so, because I've seen some of those AI podcasts and I don't like them.
Well, but that's the thing, is that I think that, that natural human sensibility of, in some fashion or another, whether it's through a screen or otherwise, connecting with another human being, is just to me, proof of the importance of the fact that we still, matter outside of all of that. I think the individual affect is a really important component to it. And, that segue kind of into your podcast here. You talk about, the podcast is called, and I have it here in front of me so I don't mess it up, folks, the High Voltage Business Builders podcast. So first, what is it that got you to move into the media space? Now, obviously, understanding internet advertising as you do, when was it that you realized that podcasting was kind of I think you mentioned around 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I started in 2021 with this podcast. I actually had a short-lived podcast for about 6 months called the IDGAF podcast. And that was a kind of fun one. The problem is I'm too opinionated, and I felt like that one was going to cause some trouble. So I shut that one down. And then somebody said, well, do one about business. We want to hear more about business and you and what you're doing. And I was like, okay. Well, so I reluctantly kind of got a mic and a higher end camera. And I started shooting a podcast for 2021. And that was the High Voltage Business Builders podcast. It was really goal oriented for 20 minutes of conversational format, and, getting in front of people in my, sphere of influence, first, to determine, who and what kind of conversation types would be beneficial to people. And then the focus is, really more towards e-commerce at the end of the day, although about 40% of my listeners are somewhere in the other realm of business, whether it's investing or financing or franchising or entrepreneurship or mindset or listening to the stories of the people that come on and feeling motivated. That's the other component of it. And it just turned into a great ongoing conversation, which has had no lack of very good guests, which I've been blessed to have quite a lot of great people come on the show.
I feel the same way about both your guests and mine on Secondhand Talent. And I think that, what you just mentioned there, the stories are what quite a number of the folks tune in for, because the reality of what a lot of people are going through, I don't think is accurately reflected on a lot of those really large podcasts that we see. And not to say I'm not a fan of any of them, but, the PBDs, the Joe Rogans, like the really, much, much, much bigger podcasts are not really asking for the stories of the folks who are really going through it. They're talking to the folks who've been there, done that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there needs to be a space for stories that are relatable.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt to see the insights and have the humanized aspect of these kind of conversations. I think that's important. I know it's important in the kind of business that I do. To have that conversation with people and to get to know more about them, and them to get more about me and know more about me. And so part of that question you had asked about the podcasting really got down to, I was asked to be a guest on a couple of podcasts prior to launching my own show, which was partly between the other podcast and launching the business one. And I thought, oh, you know what, that's actually probably a great way to have a non-threatening relationship developing aspect of my podcast with people. And it turns out that's kind of how it's worked out. The podcasts are not particularly aimed at me or my brand or that kind of storyline. It's aimed at focusing on the people that are there and having that story and telling, how their opportunity in business and other things they're doing have changed their life or impacted their family or, created opportunities for business. And that has built relationships with those folks. And through some of those relationships, it's turned into business. So as a byproduct, it's a happenstance, if you will.
Well, it's an outgrowth of good intention, in my opinion. It's
it's a way to establish a relationship.
When you forge those relationships from a positive, strongly built foundation without ulterior motive, that goes a long way. And, similar to, all those proposals that didn't work. Yes, a lot of the conversations may just be one-offs, but like you just said, there are going to be those ones that lead to those further opportunities. But just being willing and able and present to cultivate that atmosphere. Again, like my dad said, that's 90% of it, and then
it is
the rest
it's
of
who
it
you
is
attract, right? I mean, that's what it ended up becoming with the podcast and the things that I do is really attraction marketing, and getting people to, see what we're doing, at least get them to click and decide what to go from there, and just only attract the right ones at the end of the day, is really what I'm shooting for. In the kind of business we do, we're very focused on the brands we control, the things we do in our business. I do offer the opportunity for others to work with us. And come into that e-commerce, business if they're new to it, or help them expand their existing. And those folks who have kind of been raised up, the 300 or so that have come in since 2019, there's 4 of those people now that help us run our companies, and they were sort of the cream of the crop, and they became great operators and built their own business and had good success. And we said, hey, who might want to run a company with us and share some profit? And we had a list of people come, and we kind of chose the ones we felt would be the best aptitude to work with us. And now they're working with us on building companies. And so we raised up people that we trained to become business owners instead of hiring employees.
And folks, that might seem like a fairly large sample size, but just over 1 out of every 100 people that you start with is there 4 years later helping you run your company. Those odds are that's astronomical in such a small sample size.
Had a lot of good successes. But some of the more successful people of the group are very busy running their companies, and these people are successful but had more time on their hands. And it just worked out to be a great balance when we said, hey, who's interested in working with us? And we have some really great people who know exactly what they're doing and don't need micromanagement, and they already know how to run a company and they know how to do the right things. And so it's worked out great that we can do these things at larger, amounts of scale, but not have all the overhead that comes along with it. So we technically don't have any employees now. And that's made life a little easier. They don't need me to micromanage them and tell them everything to do and how to do all the things. And they don't have to incentivize them through some sort of paycheck or whatever. They're incentivized by their own strengths and what they do well, and know what the outcome can be if that turns profitable greater for both of us and what the company can do. That's an interest that they play into. And it's been a great part of building Voltage. And I'm excited to see where it continues to go into the next year.
Yeah, I mean, positive reinforcement is an exponentive power. I mean, it creates value exponentially. And if you create that environment where you're fostering growth and giving positive response to the people that do well,
way more positive,
they will continue to grow and do well. I mean, I think that's
pour into other people with the purpose and value, and out of that will come the profits.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So before we wrap up, tell us a little bit about Voltage. What do you do?
Yeah. So in simple terms, we help entrepreneurs build physical product businesses to an exit. So we teach them the fundamentals. We teach them the product research, what the hell do I sell component of this, how to make it profitable, ensure that it will be profitable without 80% confidence that you're selling the right product and it's profitable. How not to marry your product, but steal someone's girlfriend instead. Because there's plenty of girlfriends in the marketplace. I am married, as I remember. But go out and look at the opportunities to create different kinds of products within your brand. Marry the brand, not the products, in other words. And then how to get traffic organically or pay-per-click. We talk about that because that's an important part of building these foundations. And as I mentioned, building from the beginning with the end in mind. We call that the platinum principle. which is that you can build this asset, and when you're ready, you pull the parachute for potentially life-changing, wealth and time freedoms from creating an asset, which is a product-based business. So we have them manufactured for us, we have them shipped in, and we sell them in places like Amazon and TikTok and Shopify and retail places. We start on the Amazon channel. It's a great place to go incubate the products. And with 200 million people and 49% of all online sales going to Amazon, it's a great place to take new people who've never sold anything and help them get sales, and really teach them how to get this brand off the ground. My overarching big, hairy, capitalistic agenda, you ready for that?
You betcha.
It's within 4 to 5 years of their starting the brand with us, growing the brand, potentially scaling the brand, that it becomes a saleable asset in which we have what's called a first right of refusal to offer them an opportunity to look at buying that business from them. So we both are the beginning and the end of the stage with them when they're ready to sell it. We have a private equity group behind us called Patriot Growth Capital. It's a veteran-funded, veteran-backed, veteran-ran initiative. They helped 16,000 veterans last year. And this part of it is to help through a mechanism of e-commerce by which when we acquire companies, we try to put veterans to work in those companies as part of the mission. So they have an opportunity, if they're coming out of deployment or somewhere in between, to help their families and grow, to teach them up into the place where somebody would be able to in 5 years and 10,000 hours of training and proficiency in the management role, have the opportunity to acquire that business away from us after 5 years, should they choose to do that. Giving them an opportunity for life.
That's something in two regards. One, kind of as you say, being, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but being the alpha and the omega of the process from, kind of incubation to letting it go,
From conception to exit all the way. Yeah. From brand building.
So providing that exit ramp is so huge and such a great way to build trust, because it gives confidence knowing that when that person is ready to step off, you're not going to be there over their shoulder. And I would be remiss not to mention that it makes my heart sore that you have a program for veterans. My grandfather was a Marine, and he passed 13 years ago. I've got his flag hanging framed in the living room. And, I think that, it's extraordinarily important, especially in an era where, as we mentioned before, the growth acclimation level is so steep, to provide a softer landing for folks who have not been around for a deployment or for a few years, or they might be on a second tour and things have changed very rapidly. So to be able to provide that sort of soft landing into business for those folks, I think that's really tremendous. That's really, really something to be proud of.
Yeah, it is a great initiative. It gives business a mission and a purpose. And as we can speak into the lives of those individuals and have that influence, you never know where it's going to go. So that's an opportunity that we are doing. And we're closing on the first business in August as part of that initiative. And we're excited to hopefully get another 4 under our belt in the coming year or two as we acquire additional companies to kind of go after that mission. And yeah, I do have a vested interest in the success of those who work with us. So I'm very picky about who I choose to work with. Every person applies to work with us and determine whether or not it's a good fit. Yes, of course, there's a buy-in for those who get involved. That's part of the hurdle. I make sure that the right people go over to make sure that they're really willing to dedicate the time, energy, and attention and money to a team effort that has a mutual success.
And just for the record, Secondhand Talent has been denied repeatedly for the former, not the latter. The former. No, okay.
That's funny. No, yeah. I get it.
No, but that makes sense, because you want people to have a vested. If you're not willing to put up the capital to start something, like if I wasn't willing to buy this microphone, for example, or to pay for the subscription I use for video editing software, or all the hardware that it takes, the camera and the audio bus, again, it may not mealy. If I'm not going to, who will? So I think that's just kind of essential. Well,
it is. And in the last 4 or 5 years, at least, I've given away opportunities for someone to train with us for 12 months free, one-on-one. And they failed out. They quit. And I've had other people pay and they have extreme success. So again, when you have skin in the game, you change your desire to go after something. That's just how it works. Nothing free really ends up panning out in the long run. So everybody who's searching for a free way to do something to solve their short-term problems is going to find that free is what it's worth. And if they're not willing to put in the effort, you can be given a tremendous opportunity and completely squander it if you aren't willing to put in the effort or some skin in the game to get it done.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as the wonderful Gene Ween said, don't believe the florist when he tells you that the roses are free. Neil, any words you'd like to leave our audience with before we end the episode?
I usually just remind people of two very important things that through my life have been something I learned in my own experience. And the first one is that your opportunity begins at the end of your excuses. And the second component of that ties to operating imperfectly. Do something imperfect today, actionably, to sustain or create opportunities for your future. And somewhere down the line, something perfect will happen along the way.
You know, normally when I say that, I'm not expecting something profound, but that was wonderful. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Neil Twa, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure. Folks, we will see you next week for episode 18 with the Moon City Masters. Neil, thanks again.
Thanks for having me on. Much appreciated.
This has been another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we will see you next Wednesday. And that's a podcast. There we go. We did it. We're done.
Right on. We made it.
Yeah,